enrichment ions, which focuses on the science of spirituality. And so this series provides a complementary counterpoint by focusing more on the practice. And tonight, I'm so pleased to be introducing our very own Dr. Susanna Wu-Pong Calvert as our speaker. Susanna is a longtime academic and former atheist turned social and spiritual entrepreneur. So after her spiritual awakening following the death of her sister and husband in 2018, Susanna committed herself to her spiritual path and began offering pathways to create vibrant and harmonious relationships across the globe. And she's been motivated by her vision and call from spirit to create beloved community, including Earth and all of us on Earth. Excuse me, and all of nature as well. And Susanna initiates and fosters initiatives for healing and connection through her first nonprofit, the Foundation for Family and Community Healing, and now the new Sanctuary of Earth and beyond. And I personally am so pleased to have learned from Susanna in the classroom previously at the VCU School of Pharmacy, and spirit truly moved to bring Susanna's work back into my path in a time of my life where I was missing the spiritual guidance that I so craved. So I'm even more pleased now to continue to learn from Susanna in the spiritual realm and through her energy work. And I'm looking very forward to the talk. So if you have questions that come up, I just invite you to send them in the chat, and then we'll have some time to go through all of that later. And with that, Susanna Wu-Pong Calvert, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, thanks, Tina. It's fun to be this speaker in the speaker series that we all started just seven or so months ago, and Spirit guided me to give a talk at this time on this topic. It's a fairly ambitious topic, so I'm actually quite glad we have a small audience and we can keep it informal and casual. And I just really love your feedback. I sort of thinking about this as a like workshopping this topic. But before we begin, I'd like to, I'd like to try to advance my slides. Okay, I'll just start with a little Reiki instead of a meditation. So if you would like to be open to receive the energy, I'll take about three or 4 minutes, and just relax and just prepare to have your energy open to receive. It'll be whatever the group energy invites. Okay. Whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back. Hopefully you felt some energy moving. Felt like there was just a little density in our energy, and hopefully we all feel a little lighter. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, what I'd like to do is talk about one truth, many paths, and it's really about going from the status quo of what feels like very challenging individual and collective experiences to a solution via a simple spiritual framework for humanity. I guess I should have put simple in quotes, on how to move forward from that. And so I'm really going to be focusing on this middle objective, this spiritual framework. And I'm going to break it down, the one truth and many paths, into several mini truths, and then the many paths being process and practices. So really just proposing a framework and process for moving into solution on an individual and collective level. So I already expressed one of my crazy moment to you, and so I'm just really looking forward to any feedback or input you might have. So before we begin, I'm going to ask you to do a couple of short reflections, and I should have asked you to get some paper to write with. I think it was on the title slide, but you can just type it on your computer or grab a piece of paper or something, or if you have a good memory, you can just remember it. But the first prompt is what person, thing, or situation feels most challenging and upsetting to you right now? So it could be something that's personal, or it could be something that's in the community or nationally or globally. So just a phrase or a few words is fine. Okay, now there's going to be a second prompt, and we will get back to these later in the talk. Okay, so the second prompt is: consider a topic of conflict or disagreement in your life. So maybe you're at odds with somebody over something. And again, it could be a personal conflict, or it could be, political or something. What is your position or stance on this issue? So again, you don't need to go into a great deal of detail, just maybe a phrase or a few words. All right, so I'd like to just sort of start off with this idea of what's going on in the world right now. And I mean, I don't know if status quo feels too generous for the state of affairs, but there's this term called VUCA. It stands for volatile, unpredictable, complex, and ambiguous. And I think most people would agree that we're living in a VUCA world, and we might list the reasons that it feels VUCA as differently between us, but especially it just seems like our challenges seem to be getting higher and higher with no clear solution in sight. But I would also say that even though it feels like we have no solution in sight, that we can draw upon the wisdom of the ancients for a solution, or at least a pathway. And so I'd like to briefly talk about the hero's journey, or I like to call it the Shiro's journey, which is a framework that has been presented by Joseph Campbell who was a comparative mythologist who studied the legends and tales and stories and religion across time and culture. And he said, the question he asked was, what do all of these stories have in common? What are they all trying to teach us, humanity? And so he identified the most pervasive storyline as the hero's journey. Now, he was a man of his time. I think he died in the 80s, and he didn't talk about, he talked about the hero's journey not being for women, which I disagree with. So I'll call it the hero's journey, just so that we can be more inclusive. So again, this is the framework that comes from humanity's stories and from ancient times on forward. And so even if you have not heard of Campbell's framework, we all are familiar with the hero's journey storyline, because it is the basic formula in the epic tales and stories that we love, like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, Wizard of Oz, and so forth. And so the story goes basically like this, that the hero is in their ordinary world, which is their home, and they receive a call to embark on an adventure greater than themselves. According to Campbell, they might refuse the call on more than one occasion, in which case Campbell suggests that we run the risk of psychologically crucifying ourselves. But eventually the hero might embark on this adventure and meet a mentor, test enemies or allies, and eventually come to find that whereas initially the challenge seemed external, like they were meeting a bad guy or bad gal and needing to prevail, that eventually they can get their back up against a wall and feel like they're completely out of options. And when this happens, they can lose all hope. But eventually the hero realizes that the one thing that they always have control over or much say or power is in themselves. And so they then realize that it's not really an external challenge, but it's a journey that is internal. And so they embark on an internal journey, which Campbell refers to this phase as the innermost cave, because it's very dark and can be very scary. And he also compares it to the Jonah and the whale story, where Jonah ends up in the belly of the whale. So he likens it to the belly of the whale. And when the hero has transformed from the inside out and they become bigger than their challenge, then they are successful, they're victorious, and then they can return home in this beautiful, in this beautiful process, where it feels like doors are flying open and like they cannot fail, and they return home bearing the gift of their journey, which according to Campbell is the lost wisdom of our generation, their generation. So the hero goes through all of this just to simply relearn what the generation has forgotten or that individual has forgotten. It does feel during the journey at this phase as if the hero might be receiving supernatural help, and to me it feels like flying on the wings of destiny. Usually the hero's journey is drawn in a circle like this, but really when the hero returns home, they're actually bigger and more expansive than when they left home. And then my belief is that they also, we all have the opportunity to go on several hero's journeys in our lifetime. So it's not really a circle in my view, it's an upward spiral. And so because the hero gets bigger and more expansive every time they go on this inner journey. So to me, this framework is as important as ever, because as we're facing these challenges where we're really feeling really hopeless, that Campbell and the Stories of Humanity advise us that we should not externalize our challenges. We should go inside and find our solutions within. I think this is a very important piece of wisdom. And so that journey within is really our shadow work, and enables us to achieve our higher self, because each time we go around that loop, we get bigger and more expansive and more in line with our highest self. To me, this is extremely important for us to find our highest selves, our biggest selves, and to manifest and embody them on Earth at this point in time as an antidote to our VUCA world, not only for ourselves, but for all of humanity and all of Earth, because I believe that our destiny when we walk our path is to create beloved community for all of us, not just humans, but also inclusive of Earth. And not only for us, but for future generations. And to me, you know, from what I'm able to understand from, you know, my relationship with Earth, is that it's not just our individual and collective journey, but this is also part of the journey that Earth herself is embarking on. That Earth's changes are, in my view, part of Earth's evolution, and that we are evolving with Earth as well. And I was just very grateful when I came into the IONS community, how many people talk about this idea of New Earth, because it's what I was also getting on my own, that New Earth is, the new Earth energy is coming in, and we are, more and more of us, I think, are experiencing it and feeling it, and it's a beautiful future. So the more we embrace and accept this evolution, the more smoothly we can move into New Earth and help others to do the same. Let me see if I can widen this a bit. Okay, so how might humanity move into New Earth? So we have our VUCA challenges, and what I'm able to gather is that, well, first of all, the Shiro's journey teaches us that for every challenge, there is the gift within, should we embrace that part of the journey. I mean, I guess we don't have to embrace it. We may or may not, we're more likely to find the gift if we embrace the learning and growth that it invites. And the impression that I am getting from my own spiritual work is that these challenges are going to fuel a renaissance. And I believe there will be a renaissance on the social emotional side, as well as the spiritual. And I separated these out because the foundation for family and community healing is really here to support this social and emotional renaissance. My sense is that it is the skills that humanity will need to live in New Earth, that these are the main skills we're going to need, our social and emotional development. And that there will also be a spiritual renaissance as well that will also help us move into New Earth. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about both organizations, and then I'm going to focus on what I perceive to be this spiritual renaissance and that path of moving into New Earth. Even though I feel both are going to be are going to facilitate this move, I'm going to focus on the spiritual. Okay, so my sense of all of these Renaissance areas is that they're really focused around relationship skills. So our relationship with ourselves, each other, our families and communities, Earth, and with spirit. And the Foundation for Family and Community Healing is the nonprofit that I founded 5 years ago, and it focuses more on this side of this circle. And we barely touch upon the spiritual. It's really secular type spirituality, like mindfulness. Whereas Sanctuary of Earth is more focused on the spiritual, our relationship with spirit, and touching upon touching upon some of these others. So it's really about our relationship with ourself and spirit, and also including Earth. So there's overlap, but there's some distinction too. The foundation is a completely secular organization, whereas Sanctuary of Earth is explicitly focused on the spiritual. Okay, in either case, they're going to be designed with a sort of the same business model where we're going to be offering skill development learning modules available online as well, and for Sanctuary of Earth also in person, that they are flexible, affordable, and scalable products for everyone on Earth who is interested in learning to learn. And again, the Sanctuary of Earth more on the spiritual end, and the foundation relationship with self, others, and Earth. The foundation are really offering tools for existing communities. So we want to empower existing communities to develop their resilience in mental, emotional, and relationship health and well-being. Whereas Sanctuary of Earth, we envision more it being a tool for existing communities, but also probably better at fostering spiritual community, since many of the spiritual communities can feel to me very fragmented when compared to like the world's great religions, which are very organized. And the relationship theory for the foundation assumes that we're in relationship with everyone and everything, including Earth, and it's based on empirical evidence. Whereas Sanctuary of Earth, our main belief is that we assume that we have a unique relationship with spirit. So that's why it's going to be different from a religion, which I understand mainly will describe what that relationship is, but that we are each here to discover our unique relationship with spirit, and Sanctuary of Earth to cultivate that. And it is based on faith. So, so I am no theologian, and I am no even a scholar on anything related to this. My PhD is in pharmaceutical chemistry, so I'm about as far from this topic as one can get. Okay, so how might humanity navigate the spiritual renaissance? So Sanctuary of Earth, we're really designing to help to mediate this for humanity in a way that we foresee, might come to pass. And again, it's about using this framework of one truth, many paths, where I'm going to be presenting a simple ecumenical, theological, and philosophical or theosophical framework to approximate one truth. So this is now why why I think I was probably crazy for offering this tonight. But anyway, I'm also really excited to hear your thoughts on it. And to offer options for many paths. So the knowledge, skills, and practices for our unique connection that can be mixed and matched based on one's own sensibilities. So, so the approach that I took here was to sort of break down the one truth into smaller truths. So truths with a small t, and also what are their accompanying tenets and operating principles. So I chose 3 lowercase t truths to talk about, and together that they might comprise the quote unquote one capital T truth. There probably can be a lot more mini truths or fewer. I mean, this is just my starting point. And that they would then inform the many practices that people would mix and match for their own unique path. And then that would also, I think, inform the truth. So it'd be sort of an iterative process between these 3. And that these practices might be general as well as specific. And I'll give examples of that as I go. Okay. So here's like where my disclaimers are, because I realize like what a ridiculously ambitious topic this is from somebody who's never really studied theology and fairly new to the spiritual practice in general. But this is what came through in my guidance. And I feel like this is a starting point and a draft so that we can begin to talk about this and see if there's any value. There's no final word here. This is a starting point and forever to be, I think, a living document. Again, I just want to point out that this is faith-based, not academic or scientific, and that there's nothing new, no new concepts here. I'm really maybe just presenting them in a different way. And what I would really appreciate is that at the end of this, we discuss some questions like this. What parts of this approach have merit? What improvement is needed at this stage? And what is possible with this or alternative approaches? Like maybe you have a different strategy or approach in mind. And I just ask that we keep the discussion broad and open. Okay, so let's dig in a little bit. When I sat down to think about spiritual truths, like what would constitute a truth, I hope there's no philosophy professors here, because I'm sure we can argue any one of these points for hours. But a spiritual truth, I thought would be self-evident in theory, and something that most people would agree upon. And I say most, not all, because probably nothing humanity where everybody would agree upon it, but that it may be aspirational to fully embody. Because I think it's really easy to just like throw out truths, but then like, how do we actually live that? And I think that's the focus, that's the purpose of this exercise, in my view, is like, what do we really believe and how do we really live that in our daily lives? The truth should be as simple as possible. So if it's too detailed, like it can just then be marginally useful or too prescriptive. Like we don't want to have a tome that's 1,000 pages. Even 10 might be too long. We also don't want it too general so that it is meaningless. So I am intending for these to be ambiguous because I feel like they are subjective and to be interpreted by the person of faith, right? Like we should decide that for ourselves. So I'm intentionally leaving them ambiguous. And my hope is that they can then become a subjective aspirational target for learning and growth. So again, self-evident, but aspirational, and maybe a reference point for healing. Like, so to what degree am I not living this? Perhaps there's a healing approach that I need, or a practice or practices to get me closer. So it's a frame of reference, really. Okay, so here's my first stab at one truth. So again, I've identified 3 lowercase truths to make up this one truth. And again, this is just my starting point. You will likely have a difference in opinion from me, which is great, and I'd love to hear about it. So I'm going to just read these off, and then I'm going to go through them one by one. The mini truths, their accompanying tenets and operating principles, and some practices. And we'll do like a little mini experiential exercise with each practice to hopefully illustrate what I'm aiming at. So mini truth 1 is oneness. We are all part of source, particles of divinity. Mini truth 2, infinite mystery is the nature of the universe. And mini truth 3, life is ecstasy. In other words, pain and joy. So we go from larger to smaller or more lived experience. So the mini truth 1, oneness, we are all part of source. particles of divinity. And so here, so that I think that's fairly self-evident and probably something most of us would agree on. So this is where I feel the tenets and operating principles give us a little more to sink our teeth into. So when I think about oneness, I think about, well, what does that mean? And what does that include? And it seems like it would include God or goddess, however you define, or Allah, depending on how you define source, divinity, creator, creation, spirit. But this is also you, it's me, it's we, it's one, like our collective one, and the whole, right? And so what I find really fascinating about this is that you immediately notice paradox and contrast, right? Because if we really believe in oneness, then how is it that I am separate from you, which is different from we? So am I the same as you, or am I unique, or vice versa? So we immediately get struck with these paradox and contrasts. Same with light and dark, like as spiritual people, we like to talk about be the light. It's like, well, what about dark? Dark is part of creation too. Same as good and bad, up and down, in and out, the energetic, the physical, separate and together. Like, how can you have separate and together? Like, how can you have separate when we're all one? How can we have together when we're distinct beings? Creation and destruction and embrace and avoid, like all of these opposites are all part of the whole. And so, we can really dwell on this ad nauseum, but to me, it boils down to the practical consideration of this. Again, how do we embody this truth when there is so much paradox and contrast in just this notion? So here, as a principle of oneness, I really like to go to this construct of yin yang, which is an ancient, I don't know, Chinese or Buddhist or I guess Taoist idea. And so again, like I said, like a lot of spiritual people like to be like, be the light, but it's like, well, what about the dark? How can you be light without having dark? And, the Buddhists talk about the shadow on the mountain, like whenever you have one side illuminated, there's another side in darkness, and they always go together. And so the yin yang symbol illustrates that you have both the light and the dark at any one time. But it also, and they're in balance and they're in movement. The other thing that I think often gets overlooked is that the contrasting color or whatever is in each side. So, for example, if we were to talk about good or bad, good and bad as yin and yang, where good would normally be considered the light side, bad the dark side. Well, there is always like a silver lining to every challenge or bad thing that happens or loss. So that's where this light circle comes in as part of the integration of the yin. And there's always a downside to everything that we would consider good and light. So for example, if my life is really smooth and easy, I'm less likely perhaps to invest in my learning and growth, right? So there's a downside. There can be complacency in some cases when things are going well. So by remembering that there is always light and dark and there's movement and integration, that to me, it's a wonderful principle to strive for, to live this principle of oneness. And so even though there's contrast and paradox, there's also oneness and integration. And we can also look at this in terms of our psyches. So I think this is a Freudian diagram or depiction of our known self the identity that we put out in the world, which is represented by our ego and is known to our consciousness as our persona. But there's also the unconscious, unknown side to us, which is our shadow. So just like the yin yang, there's the ego, which is the yang, and the shadow, which is the yin. And they are always coexistent and ideally are in dynamic relationship and hopefully in balance and integration. But when we reject our shadow, so this will contain all of our fears and our wounds and the things we don't want to face, then we can, in my view, we can be out of balance. And then those shadow issues will just bubble up and interfere with our lives. And we will say, oh, this is bad. Well, it's also probably our shadow side that is asking to be healed. So I feel like this yin yang philosophy is really an important framework to keep in mind when we really are trying to embody that oneness. And especially when we get into that polarity, of right and wrong and good and bad, and that what we call good and what we call bad are all part of the one, and the yin and the yang. So oneness general practices to me are all around yin yang. So balance the two and embrace both sides, because when we embrace our shadow, then we can create balance and find the wisdom, as opposed to just wishing we just had one side. Why would we wish to be out of balance? So we would also then integrate and hold both extremes and everything in between as one. So it's really easy to get into these these discussions of polarity. Like I think our political landscape is just really taking this to a fine art of being polarizing. But both extremes are part of the one, as well as all of the perspectives in between. And as Shakespeare said so perfectly, there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So what struck me once, I was having a political conversation with somebody, and what he thought was yang, I thought was yin, and vice versa. It's like we didn't agree on which was light and which was dark. So it's very subjective, and we I think we fall down on living our principle of oneness when we believe there's only one way to look at it. And when we create that balance within, so we're doing the Shiro's journey and doing our innermost cave, our shadow work, and we bring the gift, then we can create that balance and that learning and growth and illumination in our outer reality and more. So these are just some of my general practices. This is not meant to be an exclusive list. So I'd like to pause for a minute and do a little meditation here as we think about oneness. So if you'd like to close your eyes, and I'll do a guided meditation for about 3 minutes. So put your feet flat on the floor and feel the energy in your seat, and just imagine it going deep into earth. And just with your mind's eye, look at yourself and your energy, and just feel your energy body that animates your whole body, every limb, all your skin surface and organs within. In your head and neck, chest, belly, hips, legs, feet, and toes. Just feel it from the inside. And allow it to radiate on out. And just feel it filling up the air around you. You're giving off this beautiful glow. And now just imagine that your body is all of the cosmos. And maybe one organ represents one galaxy, and another organ, another galaxy or star system, and so forth, that each of your parts are a different part of creation. And that if you drill down to any one organ, you might find many solar systems and planets. And as you drill down into a cell or into a molecule, you might find different species and elementals. And as you dug down even further into the subatomic space, maybe you're finding individual beings, like a person or a plant, as a quantum particle. And then imagine the whole collection of humanity and Earth, a whole collection of creations, and all of the planets in the solar system or galaxy, another collection of creations, and so forth. And in this way, our reality can feel very recursive and similar at the micro and the macro level. So think back to that person, thing, and situation that felt challenging and upsetting to you that we identified earlier. Where would that be in your body, that challenging situation? Where are you relative to that challenging person, thing, or situation? What's its relationship between you and it? And does that thing still feel right or wrong, or good or bad? And if you are able to distinguish it and label it as bad or wrong, then maybe just send it some love. Say, thank you for being part of my divine being, and being the yang, yin to my yang, my perceived yang. Okay, and when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Okay, so that was my, I don't know, my proposal or my suggestion for first mini truth about oneness, and how we might really contemplate it from a practical standpoint, and how to really live it and embody it in our lives, because it's really hard to do in practice, and it is something that we have to keep going back to repeatedly. Probably like with all of these things that seem simple on the surface. So let's go on to truth 2, infinite mystery of our world, or of creation. Creation as a largely unknowable and infinitely complex circumstance. So let's talk about the tenets and principles of this. Again, infinite mystery, just like God equals goddess equals Allah equals you equals me, is that it's just going to be full of paradox and contrasts. Like on some level, things can seem so simple, like pick up a rock. Boy, that looks simple, but really, if you were to look more deeply at it, it is a complex mix of many different elements and structures, crystals, or amorphous groupings of molecules. And that simplicity and complexity applies to everything. The human body is at the surface very simple looking, but infinitely complex. And that this happens at every level, just like we contemplated in that meditation, that what happens in the micro can happen at every level. And really, our capacity to understand is minuscule. And so I used to really need to have a lot of certainty in my life, and I'm sure it was very obnoxious. And sometimes I find myself still wallowing in certainty when really what is needed is, in my view, is a greater dose of humility and openness to all that we do not understand. This very exercise is a bit of a challenge, thinking I know something, but I think really the main thing I'm sure of is that I know very little, if anything. So in terms of general practices for the infinite mystery, the three I came up with was to always supplement our cognitive knowledge and intelligence with other forms of knowing and discerning. So Tina gave you my background, and I was so in my head and, so invested on being the expert in knowing. And, I look back and it's just laughable. And I'm sure there's ways that I'm, being in a sense of knowing that I will look back on 10 years from now and just laugh at that too. So it is a constant challenge and invitation, and that we instead foster childlike curiosity over judgment or need for certainty. Like, oh yeah, well, that perspective is yin for sure. That's bad. That's, how do I know? How do I know? And that it would maybe behoove me to embrace the mysterious unknown and the magic of creation, and stay in that space. So this second exercise relating to infinite mystery is for you to think back to the second reflection prompt, where I asked you to consider a topic of conflict or disagreement in your life, and what is your position or stance on this issue. Now, in terms of discovering or exploring the infinite mystery, I'm going to ask you to reflect on these three questions. First of all, is there any validity to the opposite perspective, and even just a grain of truth? So I'll just give you a few seconds to think of that. Second question, in what ways is your own perspective not always or necessarily true? How might it not be necessarily true? So take a moment to think of that. And third question, what are some possible unforeseen or unintended consequences to your view or approach, given we don't know all of the things that are attached to it? Okay, so I hope this series of pretty simple questions. This is really, I got this technique from a book by Byron Katie called Who Would You Be Without Your Story? And it invites us to constantly be questioning our beliefs and assumptions about ourselves and each other and the world, and help us to consider both ends of the extreme and maybe the points of view in between, where probably I imagine that the most effective solutions and anything resembling the truth might actually lie. Okay, so we talked about too many truths to so far comprise the one truth, many paths. And we talked about some of the tenets of those truths and the practices which comprise the paths, might comprise some elements of the paths. So the third truth I'd like to propose, mini truth, is life is ecstasy or ecstatic, which is pain and joy. And I heard somebody define ecstasy that way, and I thought that was so provocative and profound. So we already talked about positive and negative, and yin and yang as always being present. And you could say the same for pain and pleasure. And even though they're really subjective and really can be very interrelated. And a Buddhist philosophy says that desire is the root of suffering. So when we just desire only the good things or the things that we generally consider light, then that can increase our suffering, because then we're denying the shadow side of the mountain, the dark side of the mountain. And so we can get off balance and off kilter. And furthermore, when we close ourselves to pain, we also close ourselves to joy. So what we're really doing is we're not preventing the pain, we're just narrowing our spectrum of our ability to feel. And then pretty soon we're not feeling anything, and then we're self-medicating and and maybe like even cutting is I believe a response to trying to feel something or to control one's feelings. So it takes great courage to really open ourselves up to the full range of emotions. But if we are to do that, to experience ecstasy, then then the practices would include fully feeling all range of emotions, and to remember that they are temporary. So that's where being mindful and just allowing the emotion to float down the river, know that they are temporary, both positive and negative ones. And to reflect on the downside of positive emotion, like we talked about earlier. It might breed complacency, it might not, but I feel like it's more likely to. And also to really lean into the opportunities in discomfort and challenge. And as we talked about with this Shiro's journey, that shadow work, doing that inner cave work, that rising to the discomfort and challenge helps us to discover the gift, which would be the light circle within the yin. And that a general practice is to again, explore the continuum of perspectives and beliefs and notice how that shifts our emotions. So if I'm really angry because I believe, oh, this person is bad or what they're doing is wrong, well, I'm going to just be really mad. But if I can explore the whole range of perspectives and go, oh, there's a downside to this thing that I'm proposing, and there's an upside to this thing that I'm so mad about. So, we can modulate our emotions that way. So the third little exercise for ecstasy is to think back to the prompt in that last exercise where we explore the opposite perspectives, and just recall if you recall how you felt when you embraced a more open perspective, and what situations in your life might benefit from considering and accepting a broader perspective and viewpoint. Okay, so I'll just give you a moment to reflect on that. Okay, so just to sum up, what we've been talking about is how our VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, is full of challenge, whether it's in our personal or collective lives. And that my sense is that this is going to spur a renaissance in our social, emotional, and spiritual perspectives. and that the Foundation for Family and Community Healing will support the former, and the Sanctuary of Earth will support the latter. And the framework we have been discussing tonight has to do with this idea of one truth, many paths, where we just discussed 3 mini truths and their accompanying tenets and operating principles, and the resulting practices that might ensue, which would cumulatively encompass maybe a portion of the many ways that we individually connect with the divine. And to help us have a framework for really embodying these many truths as part of our spiritual practices and growth. And as I mentioned, that this is, to me, part of the framework of the Shiro's journey, where this inner work can be used to help us create balance and find the gifts, discover our shadow, and to move closer to embodying these truths such as oneness and infinite mystery that we were talking about. And in so doing, whether we do it proactively to help us be more resilient and prepared for challenges, or if we do so reactively, in other words, waiting for, when life's disasters and tower moments hit us, that we can also employ this process, or both, because, probably, that the proactive work is not going to prevent things, things that feel disastrous from happening, but at least it'll give us some tools to respond perhaps more effectively if it's something that we're working on. And that every time we go around the cycle, that we get bigger and more expansive, and rather it being a circle, that we can spiral upwards to become closer to embodying our higher selves. So as we spiral up and do that inner work, the closer we get to, in my view, helping to support the evolution to New Earth, both individually and collectively, and with Earth herself, and that we can create heaven on Earth by embodying our higher selves. So I'd like to just pause and end with what are the next steps for the 2 organizations. The foundation is, 3.5 years or 4 years ahead of Sanctuary of Earth. We're fully functional platform, and we are just looking to really penetrate regionally and eventually globally. And also locally. So we would love to talk to anybody who might be interested in joining us in that effort. That will, and again, this is for our social and emotional renaissance and resilience. And that we're going to be continuing to refine, develop, and expand our Sanctuary of Earth offerings and framework. So this framework is really the first presentation of what that might look like. And of course, it's going to continue to evolve. This is just a starting point. In addition to this speaker series, we will be, I believe, offering classes and online modules starting this fall. And we hope you will join us. And one of the ones I want to offer is on the Shiro's journey, and how, learning more about that and how to integrate that in our lives. And our long-term goals will be to support spiritual communities as they form and develop, and to make our platform sustainable, scalable, accessible, relevant, and timely, and to keep Earth as center of beloved community. So that's all I had. As I mentioned, I really love to get some thoughts or feedback of a general nature, and we can have some talk on specifics as well if you wish. It might be more valuable to keep it broad, but these were the questions I proposed earlier. What parts of this approach have merit? What improvements, probably plural, are needed at this stage? And what's possible with this or alternative approaches? So I would love to see Any of your thoughts or feedback on the exercises?
Well, I just want to say thank you, first of all. I personally feel like a little mind blown, the emoji where I'm like, wow, yeah, there's a lot of points that really resonate. And I feel as though I'd struggle to put language around specifics. But mostly for me, I'm like, I'm all in.
Oh, I always known that I've blown my talk when like there's just crickets and it's like, oh no. Thanks, Tina. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, Susanna, Tom, I am always extremely impressed with your ability to organize things in ways that are not only way beyond my abilities, but um, it's just amazing that you've taken this paths from many, truth is one idea, and created all these wonderful charts out of it. Um, and I think it's a great framework for people to work with. Um, it's it's something I would never have come up with in a million years.
I would have said the same of myself 6 months ago, Tom, but
Well, yeah, but you have a history of being a professor, so you do have you have a lifetime of training to do this. So I just think it's really fabulous. And by the way, my talk next month will be much more modest in a way than this, but it will include ideas from Byron Katie because the subject will be letting go of limiting beliefs, and that's what her stuff is all about. It's been about a lot of it my whole life.
great, Tom.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is anybody else still feeling the Reiki?
Yeah, were you guys able to feel the energy move?
Yeah, I was feeling it strongly, and then I feel like I was feeling it all the way through your talk. So I think there was a kind of a transmission going on the whole time.
Mm,
That was pretty cool.
I probably like did my superpowers to make you compliant. And
Right.
Yeah.
Anybody else? I would love to hear your thoughts. Do we need different truths or fewer or change them or more? Anybody else?
Lindley, you're on mute. Unmute yourself. Unmute. You're on mute.
Susanna can unmute me.
Oh, thank you. I said I was very much impressed with the presentation. I don't have anything to ask or add, but thank you for the presentation very much, Susanna.
Okay, thank you, Lindley. Appreciate you being here. Okay, well,
I was also, by the way, very impressed with your PowerPoint presentation. It was very nicely done.
Yeah. I'm bowled over by
well, I'll give you my secrets later.
that.
It's really easy. Okay, well, if there's no other thoughts or discussion, I mean, I think I will, move forward with this framework for whatever might call for it in Sanctuary of Earth. And I would invite you to continue to stay in touch, and maybe if you're interested, sign up for one of our classes. I think we're going to be offering intuition development, and I'll offer Shiro's journey discussion group, and we'll have a Gene Keys one and shadow work before long as well. So it's at sanctuaryoferarth.org. And again, we really appreciate your donations to help support our programs. If you're feeling so moved, you can go to our website and click the donate button. And the Foundation for Family and Community Healing, the social emotional learning and resilience education is at healingedu.org. And as you know, I do Reiki, and I'm a channel and offer readings and intuitive guidance. And you can find me there at susannacalvert.com. And here's my email address. So thank you so much. And as Tom mentioned, next month's talk, we are going to be back to the first Wednesday of the month at 7 o'clock. Let's see, what's that date? And Tom, you're going to be talking about, so it's Wednesday, the 2nd of August.
Letting go of limiting beliefs.
Letting go of limiting beliefs. So great. I teed that up for you, and it sounds like a perfect segue and a very valuable topic.
And by the way, folks, this Saturday is our monthly IONS meeting. It's the third Saturday is coming early this month. We have a fellow named Howard Beatty from near Seattle, Washington, who is going to be talking about a book he wrote called The ETs Speak, I believe, and where he developed a procedure for using hypnosis subjects to be able to connect and basically channel conversations with extraterrestrials. And so it should be a very interesting topic, and I hope you will join us in that. That has a different ID number and so forth. During this meeting tonight, there are a couple of people that showed up on my email who were trying to dial into this meeting by using the IONS meeting ID number and password, and they were not getting in. I emailed them back and gave them the number for this meeting, but they did not connect for whatever reason. Anyway,
just have endless Zoom problems. I mean, maybe we should just go to one.
Like all along the Watchtower, too much confusion.
No. Okay. Well, this will be available on YouTube. So, Tom, I wonder if we could send those YouTube links out with the announcement too. That might be nice if it's not too confusing.
YouTube, that's probably a good idea.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate you bearing with me with my exploration, and we'll see you at the IONS meeting on Saturday.
Great. See you there.
Enjoy all.
Bye-bye.